The neighborhood was supposed to be perfect. At least that was what the glossy brochures had promised. Manicured lawns, tidy sidewalks, and rows of near-identical homes with beige siding and trimmed hedges all fed into the image of a suburban paradise. And at the center of it all was the Homeowners Association, the HOA, that ruled with ironclad regulations, hidden behind friendly newsletters and polite smiling board members who always claimed to be protecting property values. That started innocently enough, as most suburban battles do. The homeowner had recently installed a modest backyard pool. It wasn't the grand resort-style centerpiece you'd find in celebrity mansions, nor was it a rickety above-ground setup that screamed afterthought. Instead, it was simple, tasteful, and built with hard-earned savings. The pool sat neatly behind the fence, surrounded by new stone pavers, a few lounge chairs, and a grill nearby for summer afternoons. It was a dream, small but personal, the kind of space that promised relaxation after long work weeks. The neighbors noticed right away. Kids peeked over fences. Adults slowed their evening walks just long enough to steal glances. Some smiled, whispering about how nice it must be to have a cool place to relax during the rising heat waves. Others didn't smile. In communities like this, envy spread faster than wildflowers, and it wasn't long before the HOA's eyes fell directly onto the backyard oasis. At first, there was only a letter. A short, neatly typed notice slipped into the mailbox with the HOA's embossed logo at the top. The letter said the pool had not been properly approved by the association. It mentioned violations of aesthetic uniformity and potential issues of safety and liability. It warned that the pool must be removed, or corrective measures would be taken. Most people might have panicked, but panic wasn't the first reaction here. Frustration was. This wasn't some towering monstrosity of a structure ruining the neighborhood's skyline. It was a pool, contained and clean, in a fenced yard no one else had any right to dictate. But HOAs thrive on technicalities. They thrive on control. The days stretched into weeks, and soon the letters multiplied, each one escalated in tone. Failure to comply. Imminent fines. Escalation to legal action. The mailbox, once a place for catalogs and bills, became a constant reminder of the HOA's looming presence. The homeowner kept the notices stacked neatly on the kitchen counter, like trophies in a silent war. But instead of dismantling the dream, those letters fueled something unexpected, a vision. The more the HOA pressed, the more the idea grew. If they hated the small pool so much, what would they do if that pool became something far grander, not smaller, not removed, bigger, bolder, impossible to ignore? The concept of building a water park in a suburban backyard sounded absurd at first, the kind of thing you'd hear as a joke told over drinks. But absurdity has a way of transforming into determination when pushed hard enough. And soon, sketches began filling notebooks. Lists of suppliers, contractors, and features took shape. Instead of tearing down the pool, the plan was to elevate it into something that no one in the neighborhood, least of all the HOA, could have predicted. The first step was small enough, expanding the deck around the pool. Workers arrived early one morning, trucks rumbling down the quiet cul-de-sac. Neighbors pulled curtains aside, whispering about construction noise. Sawdust, hammering, and the faint smell of cut wood drifted through the air. The HOA board president, an older woman with a permanent frown etched into her face, walked her dog by 3 times that day, stopping to glare at the activity. The deck grew, doubling the lounging space. It wasn't flashy yet, but it was a foundation. Then came the next addition, a slide. Bright, twisting, and undeniably fun. The slide curved down into the pool like something borrowed from a resort. Kids riding bikes slowed to stare at it, jaws wide. Some begged their parents to let them try it out. The HOA noticed too. Another letter arrived, thicker this time, citing unauthorized structures and community disruption. But the letters were no longer threats, they were fuel. Each complaint only sharpened the determination to keep building. The sound of power tools became the soundtrack of the summer. Concrete was poured, pipes were installed, and soon water features began to sprout like fountains in a plaza. Jets of water arched gracefully over the pool, catching sunlight in sparkling rainbows. A splash pad appeared at the edge of the yard, complete with spraying nozzles that danced in rhythmic bursts. By the time the HOA realized what was happening, the backyard had already transformed into something unrecognizable. It wasn't just a pool anymore. It was the beginnings of a full-blown water park. And the neighborhood noticed. Kids leaned over fences, their laughter spilling into the air as they watched fountains spray and slides twist. Parents whispered in mixed tones of envy and outrage. The HOA board convened extra meetings, their voices raised late into the night behind closed blinds. They didn't just see a pool anymore, they saw defiance. The irony was undeniable. The HOA's obsession with removing the pool had created something far larger, far louder, and far more impossible to control. What could have been a simple backyard amenity had turned into a spectacle. But this was only the beginning. The first wave of construction was done, but the vision wasn't complete. The idea wasn't just to build a bigger pool, it was to build something untouchable, a monument to freedom from the HOA's iron grip. As the first summer of battles with the HOA came to a close, the water park was only half formed. There were more features planned, a lazy river winding along the fence line, towering fountains, and maybe even a wave machine. The budget stretched thin, but the resolve never wavered. The HOA, meanwhile, prepared its next move. Fines piled up on paper, legal warnings grew harsher, and talk of lawsuits swirled. But paperwork couldn't stop the flow of water, nor the laughter of neighborhood kids who secretly slipped into the yard when invited. The war was no longer about a pool. It was about control, defiance, and the battle between conformity and creativity. The HOA had made its move, and now the backyard water park stood as the answer. The neighborhood was changing. The pool that was never supposed to exist had become the spark for something much bigger. And as the first chapter of this suburban battle closed, one thing was certain. Neither side was backing down. Because in this war of water and wills, the HOA had drawn its line. And on the other side of that line stood a water park that was only just beginning to take shape. The small pool, once a modest symbol of summer leisure, had become the spark that ignited a full-blown feud. The homeowner had been forced into a corner by the HOA's repeated threats, demands, and letters. What had begun as a battle over something ordinary, a simple backyard pool, transformed into something much larger. What the HOA had failed to anticipate was that their attempt to control one person's property would inspire not just resistance, but creativity fueled by defiance. After the removal notices came and the pool's future seemed bleak, the homeowner faced a choice: surrender quietly or build something that could not be ignored. What settled into place was a decision born out of equal parts frustration and ingenuity. If they wanted the pool gone, then the pool would not just remain, it would evolve into something so extravagant, so spectacular, that no one in the neighborhood would ever forget it. And so began the transformation. It started with research, plans sketched in the late hours of the night, and hours spent reviewing every corner of the yard. Measurements were taken again and again, not simply for compliance, but for opportunity. The backyard that once held a pool suddenly became a blank canvas for something grander. While the HOA envisioned a sterile lawn, the homeowner envisioned a private paradise, a place where water would flow and sparkle, where laughter and joy would drown out the endless drone of complaint letters. The first addition was the slide. Not just any slide, but a winding, colorful creation that twisted from a raised platform down into the shimmering water below. It was the kind of slide one might expect at a resort, not a suburban backyard. The platform was reinforced, the curve carefully angled, and the excitement of its construction created ripples of curiosity throughout the neighborhood. Neighbors peeked over fences, whispered to one another, and some even stopped by under the guise of casual friendliness, eager to see what was taking shape. Then came the fountains. Jets of water installed along the pool's edge, arching like silver ribbons into the air, splashing down with rhythmic patterns. They added both spectacle and sound, turning the pool into a stage of movement and light. At night, when the fountains were paired with newly installed LED lights, the water glowed in hues of blue, purple, and green, painting the yard in a dreamlike glow. But it did not stop there. What was once a backyard pool was slowly but steadily evolving into something larger, a water park on a residential lot. Small splash zones were added for children, with sprinklers shooting in playful arcs, creating the kind of carefree fun that no one could resist. Inflatable attractions joined the mix, climbing walls that floated on water, and shallow sections redesigned with playful water features that made the space welcoming to every age. Each addition pushed the project further from the realm of an ordinary backyard pool and deeper into the extraordinary. The homeowner spared no effort, not just in the features themselves, but in the thoughtfulness of their design. Safety rails were installed, drainage carefully managed, and landscaping transformed around the structures. What had once been grass was now a path of smooth stone and shaded pavilions, where chairs and umbrellas created the ambience of a private resort. The HOA, of course, noticed immediately. Letters arrived faster now, escalating from stern reminders to outright threats. They declared the construction a violation of countless rules, citing structural changes, noise potential, and disruption of community aesthetics. But for every letter, every claim, the homeowner was prepared with documentation, permits, and just enough compliance to keep the project alive. While the HOA's frustration grew, the neighborhood's fascination deepened. Parents with children couldn't help but imagine how fun it would be to have such a space nearby. Teens stared wide-eyed at the slides and lights, imagining summer nights spent laughing instead of scrolling through their phones. Even adults found themselves lingering, thinking of pool parties, barbecues, and celebrations. Slowly, the Waterpark became more than a personal project. It became a symbol. The HOA wanted conformity, but here was proof of individuality and joy standing strong in the face of endless rules. The homeowner added finishing touches that made it undeniable. A lazy river wound its way around the yard, its gentle current carrying floaters in calm circles. Bridges arched overhead, giving the space layers and depth. Decorative rocks and plants softened the borders, so it felt both natural and surreal, a hidden oasis just beyond a standard wooden fence. With every addition, the sense of rebellion grew. What was once an attempt to silence joy had now amplified it. The HOA, in trying to eliminate a simple pool, had indirectly inspired the creation of something 10 times more elaborate and impossible to ignore. As summer crept closer, the sound of construction gave way to the sound of water. The first test runs filled the air with the hum of pumps, the splash of fountains, and the roar of the slide as it carried water down its winding path. By the time the homeowner stood back to admire it, the project was no longer just a backyard improvement. It was a transformation of the property into a private wonderland. The HOA prepared for battle, tightening its grip, gathering its rules and warning of steep consequences. But the homeowner had no intention of stepping back. The Waterpark was not a reckless act. It was a carefully built testament to freedom on one's own land. A statement that conformity could never fully erase creativity. The neighborhood watched, waiting for what would happen next. Some feared lawsuits, others expected the city to intervene, but many secretly hoped the Waterpark would endure. The first pool party was inevitable. Friends, family, and curious neighbors gathered, eager to experience the attraction for themselves. Children shrieked with laughter as they splashed through fountains. Parents lounged under umbrellas, sipping cold drinks, and teenagers lined up for the slide again and again. The sound of joy carried beyond the fence, echoing into the streets. The HOA could not stop the noise, nor the sight of people flocking toward the home that now held something no other property did. What was meant to be a quiet rebellion had grown into a neighborhood spectacle. But as with all battles, escalation was near. The HOA, cornered by its inability to control the situation, began to draft new measures, calling emergency meetings and seeking legal avenues to dismantle what they deemed a violation of everything the neighborhood stood for. The homeowner, however, was ready. Every paper trail had been secured, every permit double-checked, and every design approved where it mattered. The HOA could rage, but the Waterpark stood tall, fountains sparkling under the sun, laughter echoing into the night. And so the stage was set. On one side, the HOA determined to destroy what they saw as chaos. On the other, a homeowner who had turned defiance into art, joy, and community. The battle was far from over. If anything, it had only just begun. The weeks that followed felt like living inside a headline. What had begun as a quiet rebellion against the HOA's suffocating rules had transformed into something far bigger, louder, and more spectacular than anyone could have predicted. The Waterpark, once viewed as an absurd idea born of frustration, now stood as a community landmark, a sprawling oasis of laughter, color, and joy. Families came from neighboring towns to visit. Strangers driving down the main road slowed their cars just to peer through the hedges at the sight of towering slides and sparkling fountains. The HOA, however, was not amused. They had underestimated the homeowners' determination, and more importantly, the way the public would rally behind the bold defiance. Every letter they sent, every fine they tried to impose, was met not with silence or compliance, but with viral attention. People across the internet shared updates about the standoff, turning it into a battle between overreaching authority and individual freedom. News reporters arrived with cameras, eager to capture the story of the homeowner who transformed a suburban backyard into a water kingdom. The sight of the HOA board members grimly attending emergency meetings while children shrieked with delight just across the street became the ultimate image of futility. Their complaints no longer carried the same weight. Instead, they looked petty, small, and humorless in contrast to the joy radiating from the water park. Yet beneath the fun, there was tension. The HOA escalated their tactics, moving from fines to legal threats. They claimed property values were in danger, though real estate agents quietly admitted that demand to live in the neighborhood had actually skyrocketed, with some families even describing the water park as a feature of the community. Still, the HOA insisted it was a violation of bylaws, and they filed an official lawsuit. The homeowner prepared for battle. With the viral following behind them, crowdfunding campaigns were launched, raising money to cover legal fees. Supporters showed up to court dates wearing T-shirts with water slides printed on them, chanting outside the courthouse. The spectacle turned the once quiet suburban conflict into something resembling a small-scale movement. Meanwhile, the water park itself only grew more elaborate. New attractions were added, a lazy river winding through the property, a small splash zone for toddlers, and even a nighttime light show that turned the backyard into a glowing carnival of water and color. Each new feature seemed timed perfectly to coincide with another HOA complaint, as though the homeowner was deliberately turning every act of suppression into an excuse for expansion. Children who once had no place to gather now had a safe, joyous escape. Parents spoke gratefully about how it had brought neighbors closer together. Even the most skeptical residents, those who initially feared disruption, admitted that the water park had breathed new life into the community. Block parties formed around it, friendships deepened, and the neighborhood gained an identity beyond dull conformity. The HOA, of course, could not admit defeat. They poured time and resources into fighting the project, only to find themselves mocked online and portrayed as the villains of a suburban drama. Their names became synonymous with unnecessary control. At board meetings, tempers flared. Some members even resigned, unwilling to be the public face of a losing battle. When the final court decision arrived, it was a turning point. The judge ruled in favor of the homeowner, citing insufficient clarity in the HOA's bylaws to justify banning the pool or its expansions. The decision was broadcast widely, celebrated online as a victory not just for one person, but for anyone who had ever felt suffocated by arbitrary rules. The HOA was forced to back down. The fines were erased, the threats dissolved, and the neighborhood, once bound tightly by restriction, now lived in the shadow of a water park that had become both a symbol and a triumph. In the end, what began as an attempt to punish joy resulted in the creation of something unforgettable. The HOA had banned a pool, but in doing so, they had accidentally created a landmark, a viral sensation, and a permanent reminder that sometimes rules are made to be challenged. The water park stood as proof that creativity, resilience, and a touch of defiance could transform even the dullest corner of suburbia into a story people would never stop talking about. And as the sun set over the neighborhood, casting golden light across the glittering spray of the fountains, the laughter of children rose above everything else, a sound no bylaw could ever silence.